Star Wars The Acolyte is still one of those game-changing Star Wars programs that continue to make echoes throughout the fan base for us to be amused by. Now, whether you loved it, whether you hate it, this is my opinion. I thoroughly enjoyed The Acolyte. I felt like it had a great representation of what Star Wars is trying to tell you in subtle messages. Who am I kidding? This is a fandom who decided to riot because there was a cult of witches practicing the Force, but not calling it the Force, calling it the Thread. These same fans probably would have never enjoyed Expanded Universe Star Wars, where we talk about all different members of the galaxy practicing their own religious beliefs through their own perceptions. That's just not an idea that people can hang out with, even though it was an idea that was kind of introduced to us in the original trilogy. Shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, Obi-Wan Kenobi from a certain point of view. You always got to look at things at different angles. Which is why I'm gracing your timelines, your For You pages, your YouTube feeds, your X feeds, Facebook feeds, whatever you call it today. I'm gracing your presence with Star Wars The Acolyte. More importantly, we're going to be talking about the Ascension episode, episode 3, titled Destiny. Because this is y'all's favorite episode to talk about. So a lot of people I asked this question to gave a lot of different responses in general. I asked the question to several different people who've watched this series like this. What is this episode about? What is it trying to tell you? What is it trying to teach you? What are you learning from this episode? And what are you missing, essentially? Now, from a first perspective kind of view, when you just watch it, you're like, okay, there's a bunch of witches. They're performing a ceremony to imbue two children with the power of the Force, or more or less strengthen their connection to it in the long term, and also thinking from the perspective of, witchcraft and all that stuff. There are higher figures of power like Mother, who is basically the head witch of the entire clan, who probably has the most power. This is kind of one of those ceremonies where, this is my power, I pass it along to you kind of deal. You following what I'm saying? This is kind of that first-person narrative that you're getting when you watch the show, is these are witches, they're trying to pick their successors in order to replace them and continue leading the coven through the future. Outside this whole passing of power ceremony, there's also a couple other interesting things that are introduced in this episode. We come to understand that the twins were conceived through Mother Coral, who bore them. However, Mother Anastasia used her power to create them. Now, in Star Wars, that's a drop right there. That would insult a lot of people to think, well, it would be Darth Plageuis who is the master of life, and you're absolutely correct, because he's the only Sith who managed to master the ability to create life through influence in the midichlorians. That's kind of your first hint. I mean, we all know at the end of the series, this guy peeks out from behind a cave, kind of confirming the suspicions. I mean, why else would he just be casually hanging out in the series but to help confirm that suspicion that Plageuis has something to do with this? So I've worked in a lab. In order to succeed, at first you must experiment. And if I use any of my little scientific background in my brain to kind of think about creating something and going through the different experiments to achieve the final form, there are lab rats. Not like physical lab rats, but like not guinea pigs, but test dummies. People that you put into play in order to verify and achieve results that you're trying to achieve. The Sith are about secrecy until the fruition of their plan comes into play. Now, Darth Plagueis was more about figuring out the Force and controlling it, creating life, destroying and taking life with it, vice versa, in order to achieve his end goal, immortality. How does any of this have to do with the study of immortality, you might ask? Well, at first, if you can create life through the Force, eventually you will find a way to also tell the Force to cease that life. And I don't know if you guys have read the Darth Plagueis novel, where Plagueis does that with Darth Venomous. He basically sits there and shows Sidious how powerful he is by saying, this guy was trained by my master. He tried to kill me. Now, for that sacrilege, let's have a party, essentially, and sit here and watch this dude die and resurrect over and over again. Like a light switch. On, off, on, off, on. And he would continue doing that until finally Darth Venomous's organs failed. That's the example we get in the book of him controlling the life and death situation. And there are other notions and nods to it later on in the novel. Go read it. It's a good read. However, my brain calls back to episode 3 when Palpatine tells Anakin he could create life. So if Mother Coral bore the children, Mother Anastasia used her powers to help create the twins. And for the record, the twins are also same race as her. They're not the same race as Mother Coral, because she looks more like an Ithorian, Zabrak kind of hybrid humanoid creature, where she's more human in nature. Their skin pigments, her skin pigment matches the children, hers obviously does not. So that leads me to say, like, when you come down to genetics and in the creation of a child, these children would take on the father traits of Mother Anastasia, and we see that May takes on the ideology mindset of Mother Coral. Mother Anastasia, her full motives aren't really revealed. She's just actually being the nurturing, supportive, outstretched hand mother, vice versa, controlling father figure in the relationship. However, details, they're important. Those details matter. Where did she learn how to create life? The show told us. In the episode, there is not one, but two figures present at the Ascension ceremony. In the background, we notice two cloaked figures whose faces are never revealed. Their robes do not match the witches of Brendok at all. Obviously, I'm going to say, just because the framing and at the time of the narrative, that this figure is Darth Plageuis. He's just chilling. He's actually facing Mother Anastasia, facing the pit, and facing the eclipse. That seems like the appropriate position for the Master of the Sith to stand and observe the power of the Force and how it works in effect. And of course, here he is again, still in observance of the eclipse that's happening this way. This one has to either be Darth Tenebrous or the Stranger, or somebody else completely. No real actual connecting dot factor here yet. But this has to be Plageuis for those reasons, that he is observing the creation and experiment that he has in play here, but also watching the significance of the eclipse and how its powers help magnify the Force. Because something else in Star Wars that we come to understand, as it continues to be told now, is that they're focusing on this narrative of creating a dyad. Obviously, Darth Plagueis here, he knows that somehow this dyad in the Force, these well springs of Force power, could help him achieve his immortality. And we also see that in Rise of Skywalker, the Emperor basically resurrects himself to Episode 3 status after basically sapping energy from Rey and Ben. What makes me think that these two entities are Sith Lords observing the experiment in play? Well, not a whole lot, actually. Outside of everything that we just went over makes the most sense when you think about the narrative. There's only one other detail that I'm mentioning that actually solidifies the idea for me. These two characters don't really move throughout the whole ceremony. They are observant like statues. Then there's a moment when another witch runs in and says the Jedi are in the compound. Does this guy's head turn and move? And then the frame cuts and they're gone. Poof, they are nowhere in the sequence that follows afterwards. You do not see these robed characters again. I've been on this theory since The Acolyte came out. I'm not putting this theory down. Darth Plagueis is literally behind the entire events of The Acolyte. But hey, That's just my Star Wars theory.